Question 1. In risk management, certain techniques are used to handle potential loss exposures. Which of the following scenarios best illustrates the technique of risk transfer? A. An insured decides to save a portion of their income each month to build a personal emergency fund in case of loss. B. A business owner chooses to upgrade their facility's security system to reduce the chance of theft. C. A family purchases homeowners insurance to cover potential damages due to fire, theft, and liability claims. D. An individual avoids investing in high-risk assets to prevent financial losses. Correct answer. C. A family purchases homeowners insurance to cover potential damages due to fire, theft, and liability claims. Explanation. Risk transfer is a technique where the financial burden of potential loss is shifted from the insured to another party, typically through an insurance policy. In this scenario, by purchasing homeowners insurance, the family transfers the risk of loss from events like fire and theft to the insurance company. This contrasts with risk retention, option A, risk reduction, option B, and risk avoidance, option D. The correct answer aligns with the fundamental insurance principle that risk transfer helps individuals or entities manage exposure by spreading potential losses across a larger pool, insured group, as outlined by risk management guidelines. Question 2. Scenario. Michael owns a historic home in New Hampshire and recently experienced minor water damage due to an aging roof. He has a HA3 homeowners policy, which is a special form policy. However, upon reviewing his policy, he is uncertain if the repairs will be covered under his current insurance. What is the best advice for Michael regarding his coverage in this situation? They advise Michael that all water damage is covered under a HA3 policy regardless of the cause. B. Suggest that Michael contact his insurer, as HA3 policies typically exclude water damage caused by slow leaks or poor maintenance. C. Tell Michael that HA3 policies only cover persona. D. Inform Michael that the HA3 policy covers all damages without any exclusions, as it is an all-risk policy. Correct answer. B. Suggest that Michael contact his insurer, as HA3 policies typically exclude water damage caused by slow leaks or poor maintenance. Explanation. The HA3 policy is an open perils policy covering the dwelling and other structures against all perils, except those explicitly excluded, like water damage from poor maintenance or gradual leaks. While it is comprehensive, it often excludes damage resulting from wear and tear, aging, or a lack of upkeep, meaning Michael's water damage may not be covered. Advising Michael to consult his insurer ensures he confirms the specific exclusions in his policy. This aligns with standard practices and coverage limitations in homeowners' policies, underscoring the importance of policyholder responsibility in maintaining property to prevent damage. Question 3. Under a commercial general liability CGL policy, which of the following incidents would most likely be covered under coverage? Bodily injury and property damage for premises and operations liability. A. An employee of a company sustains an injury while on the job due to faulty equipment. B. A customer sues a business for advertising that falsely represents its competitor's product. C. A delivery person slips and falls on a business's icy entrance, injuring themselves while bringing in supplies. D. A business faces a lawsuit for failing to meet contractual obligations with a third party. Correct answer. C. A delivery person slips and falls on a business's icy entrance, injuring themselves while bringing in supplies. Explanation. Coverage of a CGL policy includes protection against bodily injury or property damage arising from premises and operations hazards. A slip and fall incident due to an icy entrance involves bodily injury directly related to the business's premises, making it eligible for coverage under this policy part. In contrast, options A and B relate to employee injuries, which typically fall under workers' compensation, and advertising injury, covered under coverage B, respectively. Option D involves contractual liability, generally excluded unless specifically endorsed. This scenario highlights the key aspects of liability coverage in protecting businesses against claims from third parties injured on their premises or due to their operations, as established by CGL guidelines and premises liability laws. Question 4. Which of the following actions best demonstrates the legal insurance principle of utmost good faith? A. An insurance agent advises a client to reduce their premium by excluding certain endorsements without explaining the associated risks. B. A policyholder promptly discloses pre-existing damage to their property when applying for homeowners insurance. C. A claimant inflates the value of damaged property in a claim to receive a higher payout. D. An insurer deliberately withholds certain exclusions from the policy's summary to simplify the terms. Correct answer. B. A policyholder promptly discloses pre-existing damage to their property when applying for homeowners insurance. Explanation. The utmost good faith is a foundational insurance principle requiring both parties, the insurer and insured, to act honestly and disclose all relevant information. Option B is correct because the policyholder's proactive disclosure ensures the insurer has accurate information for underwriting. In contrast, A and D illustrate withholding critical details, which may constitute misrepresentation, while C reflects bad faith in claim handling. The principle is established under legal doctrines to prevent fraud and enable fair contract formation, protecting both insurers and insured parties. Question 5. Under a New Hampshire personal auto policy, PAP, which of the following would likely be covered under Part D? Coverage for damage to your auto. A. Damage to the insured vehicle caused by a falling tree during a storm. B. Theft of a trailer attached to the insured's vehicle at the time of theft. C. Normal wear and tear on the vehicle's engine over time. D. Damage to the vehicle's tires due to excessive use. Correct answer. A. Damage to the insured vehicle caused by a falling tree during a storm. Explanation. Part D of the personal auto policy, PAP, covers physical damage to the insured vehicle, including comprehensive, non-collision, and collision incidents. Damage caused by a falling tree during a storm is typically covered under comprehensive coverage, as it falls under the category of events not related to a collision, like natural disasters. Options C and D involve wear and tear, generally excluded from coverage, while B might be limited or excluded depending on policy terms concerning trailers. This provision ensures insureds have protection against sudden, unexpected damages beyond their control. Question 6. Scenario. Laura owns a retail store and has a commercial general liability CGL policy in place. A customer slips on a wet floor in her store, sustaining a minor injury and demanding compensation. Laura wonders if her CGL policy will cover this incident. What should Laura understand about her coverage under the policy? A. Her CGL policy will cover the customer's injury under coverage C, which provides for medical payments regardless of liability. B. Only bodily injuries resulting from structural defects are covered by CGL policies. C. Her CGL policy will not cover this incident unless the customer can prove Laura was negligent. D. The CGL policy will cover the injury but only under contractual liability. Correct answer. A. Her CGL policy will cover the customer's injury under coverage C, which provides for medical payments regardless of liability. Explanation. Coverage C of a CGL policy offers medical payments for minor injuries to third parties, regardless of fault or liability. This provision allows Laura to cover the customer's medical expenses up to the policy limits without requiring proof of negligence, which helps prevent further legal action. Option B is incorrect as structural defects are not a requirement for coverage. C is incorrect as the policy's medical payments are no fault. And D misrepresents the scope of coverage C, which is distinct from contractual liability. The New Hampshire Insurance Code emphasizes fair compensation under liability policies to uphold business responsibility to the public. Question 7. When underwriting a property insurance policy, which of the following factors is most critical in determining the insurability of a property? A. The policyholder's personal credit history. B. The property's geographic location and potential exposure to hazards like floods or earthquakes. C. The market value of other homes in the area. D. The policyholder's employment history and income stability. Correct answer. B. The property's geographic location and potential exposure to hazards like floods or earthquakes. Explanation. Underwriting property insurance involves evaluating risk factors specific to the property itself, including its location and susceptibility to natural hazards. This risk assessment helps insurers set appropriate premiums and coverage limits. While credit history may sometimes affect personal auto policies, it is less critical in determining property insurability. The market value of other homes, C, and employment history, D, are not primary factors in property underwriting. In New Hampshire, insurers assess insurability based on property-specific factors like susceptibility to disasters, helping maintain financial solvency and fairness in premium rates. Question 8. A homeowner's insurance policy includes a replacement cost clause. If a policyholder's covered loss involves an outdated kitchen valued at $10,000 at actual cash value but $15,000 at replacement cost, what is the insurer's obligation under replacement cost coverage? A. The insurer will pay $10,000, as this is the actual value of the damaged property. B. The insurer will reimburse the full replacement cost of $15,000 to restore the kitchen to current standards. C. The insurer is only obligated to pay for the cost of materials used in the original construction, regardless of replacement cost. D. The insurer will not cover the kitchen renovation unless the policyholder pays out of pocket first. Correct answer. B. The insurer will reimburse the full replacement cost of $15,000 to restore the kitchen to current standards. Explanation. Replacement cost coverage requires insurers to compensate the policyholder based on the cost to repair or replace property without factoring in depreciation. This clause means the policyholder receives enough to replace or repair to current standards, provided the policy is in force and meets replacement cost guidelines. Options. And C. Incorrectly interpret replacement cost by suggesting limits based on depreciated value, while D is not applicable unless specified in policy conditions. This principle ensures insureds can restore property to its pre-loss state, a key aspect of indemnity in New Hampshire's insurance regulations. Question 9. In New Hampshire, a licensed property and casualty insurance agent must avoid which of the following actions to comply with state regulations and ethical guidelines? They offering clients additional endorsements to ensure comprehensive coverage. B. Rebidding, a portion of their commission to incentivize potential clients to purchase a policy. C. Conducting regular reviews of client policies to address changing insurance needs. D. Advising clients to consider higher deductibles to manage premium costs. Correct answer. B. Rebidding a portion of their commission to incentivize potential clients to purchase a policy. Explanation. Rebidding, or offering a portion of the agent's commission to clients as an incentive, is considered an unfair trade practice and is prohibited under New Hampshire's insurance laws. This restriction prevents unethical practices and ensures that clients make insurance decisions based on their needs rather than incentives. Option. And C represent legitimate and encouraged agent activities to support clients, while D suggests a standard approach for managing costs. Upholding these standards promotes ethical conduct and maintains consumer trust in the insurance market. Question 10. Which of the following best describes the function of the coinsurance clause in a property insurance policy? A. It guarantees full reimbursement of the policy limit in the event of a loss. B. It encourages policyholders to insure property to its full value by requiring them to carry a certain amount of coverage relative to the property's value. C. It limits the coverage to specific perils listed in the policy and excludes others. D. It requires policyholders to bear a portion of every claim, regardless of the coverage amount. Correct answer. B. It encourages policyholders to insure property to its full value by requiring them to carry a certain amount of coverage relative to the property's value. Explanation. A coinsurance clause is a common provision in property insurance policies that requires policyholders to insure a percentage, typically 80-90%, of the property's value. Failure to meet this requirement can result in a penalty, reducing the payout in the event of a partial loss. This clause encourages adequate coverage, aligning with insurers' goal to manage risk equitably. Options A and C misrepresent coinsurance, while D resembles a deductible requirement. Understanding coinsurance is essential for policyholders to avoid penalties and ensure proper risk protection, a critical aspect under New Hampshire property insurance regulations. Question 11. In a standard homeowner's insurance policy, which type of property is typically subject to special limit of liability? A. Jewelry, watches, then furs. B. Clothing and linens. C. Electronics such as televisions and computers. D. Appliances. Correct answer. A. Jewelry, watches, and furs. Explanation. Homeowners' policies often have special limits of liability on high-value items like jewelry, watches, and furs, which typically fall under scheduled personal property. These items may require additional coverage if they exceed policy limits. Options B and C are generally covered under the personal property limit, and D Appliances are typically included under the dwelling or personal property coverage without specifics of limits, unless deemed high value or specialized items. Question 12. Which of the following statements is correct regarding the Fair Credit Reporting Act of CRA as it applies to insurance underwriting? A. It allows insurers to use credit information in underwriting without notifying the applicant. B. It requires insurers to notify applicants if a negative decision is based on their credit report. C. It prohibits insurers from using any credit information in the underwriting process. D. It mandates insurers to disclose detailed reasons for each underwriting decision. Correct answer. B. It requires insurers to notify applicants if a negative decision is based on their credit report. Explanation. The FCRA mandates that insurers notify applicants if any adverse action, like denying coverage, is based on information in their credit report. This act is intended to protect consumers by ensuring transparency in how credit information influences insurance decisions, options, and D misstate FCRA's requirements, while C is incorrect, as credit information can legally be used in underwriting within certain guidelines. Question 13. In a New Hampshire auto insurance policy, which coverage would pay for the insured's medical expenses resulting from an accident, regardless of who was at fault? A. Liability coverage. B. Uninsured motorist coverage. C. Medical payments coverage. D. Collision coverage. Correct answer. C. Medical payments coverage. Explanation. Medical payments coverage, often referred to as MedPay, provides payment for the insured's medical and funeral expenses resulting from an accident, regardless of fault. This is essential coverage for policyholders and covers necessary medical costs up to policy limits. Options. And B do not directly cover medical expenses of the insured, and D covers physical damage to the vehicle, not medical expenses. Question 14. An insured's home is damaged by a covered peril, making it uninhabitable. Which part of a standard homeowner's insurance policy would cover the additional living expenses the insured incurs while the home is being repaired? A. Dwelling coverage. B. Loss of use coverage. C. Liability coverage. D. Medical payments coverage. Correct answer. B. Loss of use coverage. Explanation. Loss of use coverage, also known as additional living expenses, AL, provides compensation for the increased living costs the insured incurs while their home is being repaired due to a covered peril. This includes expenses like temporary housing, meals, and other essential services. Options A, C, and D are incorrect because they relate to the structure, liability for third-party injuries, and medical payments, respectively. Question 15. Which of the following is a key characteristic of a named peril homeowner's policy? A. It covers any loss, regardless of the cause. B. It covers only those perils specifically listed in the policy. C. It automatically covers all perils except for those explicitly excluded. D. It only covers natural disasters and excludes man-made perils. Correct answer. B. It covers only those perils specifically listed in the policy. Explanation. A named peril policy only provides coverage for losses caused by perils specifically listed in the policy. If a peril is not listed, it is not covered. This is in contrast to an all-risk policy, which covers all perils except those explicitly excluded. Option A describes an all-risk policy, C is inaccurate, and D misinterprets the structure of named peril policies. Question 16. In New Hampshire, an insurance agent must adhere to certain practices to avoid engaging in twisting. What best describes the practice of twisting? A. Recommending policy changes solely for increasing agent commissions. B. Misrepresenting a policy to persuade an insured to cancel and switch policies. C. Offering policy discounts that are not approved by the insurer. D. Using aggressive tactics to secure a policy renewal. Correct answer. B. Misrepresenting a policy to persuade an insured to cancel and switch policies. Explanation. Twisting occurs when an agent misrepresents or exaggerates policy features to convince a policyholder to cancel one policy in favor of another, usually to earn additional commissions. This unethical practice is prohibited to protect consumers from misleading sales tactics. Options. And D. Reflect unethical behaviors but do not specifically define twisting, and C. Involves rebidding. a different regulatory violation. Question 17. Which coverage in a standard personal auto policy would protect an insured if they were injured in an accident caused by a driver with insufficient insurance? A. Collision coverage. B. Comprehensive coverage. C. Uninsured underinsured motorist coverage. D. Liability coverage. Correct answer. C. Uninsured underinsured motorist coverage. Explanation. Uninsured underinsured motorist coverage compensates the insured for injuries and damages if an accident is caused by a driver who lacks sufficient insurance. This coverage ensures that the insured is not financially disadvantaged due to another driver's lack of adequate coverage. Options A and B relate to property damage to the insured vehicle, while D covers third-party injuries and damages for which the insured is responsible. Question 18. If a building is insured under an actual cash value policy and suffers a partial loss, how is the insurance claim typically calculated? A. Replacement cost to the damaged property. B. Replacement cost minus depreciation. C. Market value of the property. D. The original purchase price of the property. Correct answer. B. Replacement cost minus depreciation. Explanation. An actual cash value policy reimburses the insured based on the replacement cost of the damaged property, less depreciation, reflecting the property's age and wear. This method ensures fair compensation relative to the property's current value. Options A and C do not account for depreciation, and D is irrelevant to claim calculations. Question 19. In a standard homeowner's policy, which type of property would typically be excluded from coverage? A. Furniture within the home. B. Landscaping and plants on the property. C. Cash and other forms of currency. D. Appliances within the home. Correct answer. C. Cash and other forms of currency. Explanation. Most homeowners' policies exclude cash, currency, and similar assets from coverage due to the high risk and difficulty of valuation. Option was furniture. B. Landscaping, though often limited. And D. Appliances are generally covered under personal property or dwelling coverage within specified limits. Question 20. Which of the following best describes the purpose of liability coverage in a personal auto policy? A. It pays for repairs to the insured's vehicle. B. It provides compensation for medical expenses incurred by the insured. C. It covers the insured for damages or injuries they cause to others in an accident. D. It reimburses the insured for theft or vandalism of their vehicle. Correct answer. C. It covers the insured for damages or injuries they cause to others in an accident. Explanation. Liability coverage in a personal auto policy protects the insured against legal responsibility for bodily injury or property damage to others resulting from an at-fault accident. Options A and D relate to physical damage coverage, collision, and comprehensive, while B is covered by medical payments or personal injury protection, not liability. Question 21. In a standard homeowner's insurance policy, which of the following events is typically excluded under coverage? Dwelling. A. Fire. B. Windstorm. C. Earthquake. D. Lightning. Correct answer. C. Earthquake. Explanation. Standard homeowners insurance policies generally exclude earthquakes under coverage. Dwelling, requiring homeowners to purchase separate earthquake insurance if they want protection from such events. Options A, B, and D are common perils typically covered under a standard policy. Question 22. Under New Hampshire's personal auto policy, which of the following would qualify as a covered auto? A vehicle rented for use in a ride-sharing program. B, a newly acquired additional vehicle. C, a vehicle borrowed from a friend for a few days. D, a company car provided by an employer. Correct answer. B, a newly acquired additional vehicle. Explanation. A newly acquired additional vehicle is generally considered a covered auto under a personal auto policy, provided the policyholder notifies the insurer within a specified time frame, typically 1430 days. Option A is excluded for ride-sharing, C applies only under certain conditions, and D is covered only if the policy specifically includes non-owned vehicle coverage. Question 23. Which of the following types of property is often subject to sublimit in a homeowner's insurance policy? A. Kitchen appliances. B. Carpets. C. Electronics such as laptops and cameras. D. Lawnmowers. Correct answer. C. Electronics such as laptops and cameras. Explanation. Many homeowners' policies impose sublimits on high-value personal property like electronics, making it important for insureds to consider additional endorsements if they have significant amounts of such items. Options A, B, and D do not typically have specific sublimits, though the overall personal property limit applies. Question 24. In New Hampshire, what is the minimum liability coverage requirement for bodily injury per person in a car accident? A. $10,000. B. $25,000. C. $50,000. D. $75,000. Correct answer. B. $25,000. Explanation. New Hampshire law requires a minimum liability limit of $25,000 for bodily injury per person in a car accident. This coverage protects other drivers and pedestrians if the insured is at fault. Options A, C, and D do not reflect the state's required minimum. Question 25. Which of the following would typically an OT be covered under a standard commercial property insurance policy? A. Fire damage to the building. B. Damage to outdoor signs caused by vandalism. C. Flood damage to the building. D. Theft of office furniture. Correct answer. C. Flood damage to the building. Explanation. Flood damage is generally excluded from standard commercial property insurance policies, and business owners must purchase separate flood insurance for protection against flooding events. Options A, B, and D are generally covered under commercial property policies, though certain limitations may apply. Question 26. If a homeowner in New Hampshire wishes to insure their property for its full replacement cost, which of the following coverage forms should they select? A. Basic form. B. Broad form. C. Replacement cost endorsement. D. Actual cash value coverage. Correct answer. C. Replacement cost endorsement. Explanation. To insure property at its full replacement cost, a policyholder should choose a replacement cost endorsement, which allows for reimbursement without depreciation deductions. Options A and B refer to different levels of coverage with varying named perils, and D results in depreciated reimbursement. Question 27. What does the term insurable interest mean in the context of property insurance? A. The insurer's responsibility to pay out a claim. B. The policyholder's expectation of profit from the insurance. C. The policyholder's financial stake in the insured property. D. The agent's commission on the insurance policy. Correct answer. C. The policyholder's financial stake in the insured property. Explanation. Insurable interest refers to the policyholder's financial interest in the property being insured. The insured must have an economic stake in the property for the policy to be enforceable. Options A, B, and D misrepresent the definition of insurable interest, which ensures that the insured would suffer a financial loss in the event of a claim. Question 28. Which of the following is NOT generally included in the liability coverage of a standard homeowner's insurance policy? A. Medical expenses for guests injured on the property. B. Bodily injury to a visitor caused by the insured's negligence. C. Damage to a neighbor's property caused by the insured's child. D. Medical expenses for the insured if injured in their own home. Correct answer. D. Medical expenses for the insured if injured in their own home. Explanation. Liability coverage in a homeowner's policy typically covers injuries to guests and damage to others' property but does not cover medical expenses for the insured if they are injured in their own home. For that, the insured would rely on health or personal accident insurance. Options A, B, and C are standard liability coverage scenarios. Question 29. Under New Hampshire insurance regulations, how long does an insurer have to provide a written notice before canceling an auto insurance policy for non-payment? A. 7 days. B. 10 days. C. 15 days. D. 30 days. Correct answer. B. 10 days. Explanation. New Hampshire requires insurers to give policyholders a written notice at least 10 days before canceling an auto policy due to non-payment. This notice period provides insureds time to address any payment issues before losing coverage. Options A, C, and D are incorrect based on New Hampshire state law. Question 30. In a personal auto policy, what does uninsured motorist coverage typically protect against? A. Damage to the insured's vehicle from a natural disaster. B. Medical expenses for the insured when hit by an uninsured driver. C. Theft of the insured's vehicle. D. Liability for damages caused to another driver. Correct answer. B. Medical expenses for the insured when hit by an uninsured driver. Explanation. Uninsured motorist coverage provides compensation for the insured's medical expenses, lost wages, and related costs if they are injured by an uninsured driver. It is essential for situations where the at-fault driver lacks adequate insurance options, and C are unrelated to this coverage, while D pertains to liability coverage. Question 31. In a homeowner's policy, which of the following is generally covered under coverage B? Other structures, A. Detached garage. B. Personal property inside the home. C. Plumbing system within the home. D. The home's main roof. Correct answer. A. Detached garage. Explanation. Coverage B. Other structures protects structures on the property that are separate from the main dwelling, like a detached garage, shed, or fence. Options B, C, and D relate to property typically covered under coverage D, dwelling, or coverage C, personal property in a homeowner's policy. Question 32. Which of the following is a typical condition for replacement cost coverage in a homeowner's insurance policy? A. The insured must replace damaged property within a specified time period. B. The insured receives payment without needing to repair or replace the property. C. The insured must own the property for at least 5 years. D. The insured must have comprehensive auto coverage. Correct answer. A. The insured must replace damaged property within a specified time period. Explanation. Replacement cost coverage usually requires the insured to replace or repair the property within a certain period to receive full reimbursement without depreciation. If not replaced, reimbursement is often limited to actual cash value. Options B, C, and D do not align with typical requirements for replacement cost coverage. Question 33. Under New Hampshire law, which of the following is a minimum liability limit required for property damage in an auto accident? A. $10,000. B. $20,000. C. $25,000. D. $30,000. Correct answer. A. $10,000. Explanation. New Hampshire requires a minimum liability limit of $10,000 for property damage in auto accidents. This helps cover damages to another person's property if the insured is at fault. Options B, C, and D exceed the state's minimum requirement for property damage. Question 34. Which statement is true regarding flood insurance and homeowners policies? A. Flood insurance is typically included in all homeowners policies. B. Homeowners policies exclude flood insurance, which must be purchased separately. C. Flood insurance covers both earthquakes and flooding events. D. Flood insurance is only available through private insurers. Correct answer. B. Homeowners policies exclude flood insurance, which must be purchased separately. Explanation. Standard homeowners policies generally exclude flood damage, and homeowners must buy separate flood insurance, often through the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, or private insurers. Options A, C, and D contain inaccuracies regarding the availability and coverage of flood insurance. Question 35. Which of the following scenarios would typically be covered under a personal liability policy within a homeowner's insurance plan? A. The insured's car accident on a public road. B. A guest slips and falls on the insured's walkway. C. The insured's pet causes damage to their own property. D. The insured accidentally spills water on their electronics. Correct answer. B. A guest slips and falls on the insured's walkway. Explanation. Personal liability in a homeowner's policy covers bodily injuries to others and property damage the insured causes to others, A guest slipping on the insured's property falls within this coverage. Options A, C, and D do not involve liability to others, or they fall outside personal liability protection. Question 36. If an insured's home is severely damaged and becomes uninhabitable, which homeowner's policy coverage would provide reimbursement for additional living expenses? A. Coverage. Dwelling. B. Coverage B. Other structures. C. Coverage C. Personal property. D. Coverage D. Loss of use. Correct answer. D. Coverage D. Loss of use. Explanation. Coverage D. Loss of use provides reimbursement for additional living expenses if the insured's home is uninhabitable due to a covered peril, helping with costs like hotel stays or temporary rentals. Options A, B, and C cover the structure, other structures, and personal belongings, respectively. Question 37. In New Hampshire, uninsured motorist coverage is required for which of the following? A. Only for bodily injury. B. Only for property damage. C. Both bodily injury and property damage. D. Uninsured motorist coverage is optional. Correct answer. A. Only for bodily injury. Explanation. New Hampshire mandates uninsured motorist coverage for bodily injury to ensure that policyholders are protected if they are injured by an uninsured driver. Coverage for property damage is typically optional and may be added if desired. Options B, C, and D do not correctly reflect state requirements. Question 38. Which of the following best describes coinsurance via commercial property insurance policy? A. A requirement to have other insurance policies. B. A condition that the insured pays a percentage of losses. C. A clause that allows the insured to skip premium payments. D. A term that defines the maximum payout. Correct answer. B. A condition that the insured pays a percentage of losses. Explanation. Coinsurance in commercial property policies requires the insured to carry insurance equal to a percentage of the property value. If underinsured, the insured may be responsible for a share of the loss. Options A, C, and D do not accurately describe the function or intent of coinsurance. Question 39. What is the primary purpose of New Hampshire's no-fault insurance law and auto insurance? A. To allow drivers to sue for all accident-related damages. B. To cover all medical expenses without limit. C. To reduce the need for litigation after minor accidents. D. To make uninsured motorist coverage unnecessary. Correct answer. C. To reduce the need for litigation after minor accidents. Explanation. New Hampshire's no-fault insurance law helps reduce litigation for minor accidents by covering certain medical and accident-related expenses, regardless of fault. Options A, B, and D do not align with the intent or function of no-fault insurance. Question 40. In a personal auto policy, what is covered under Part D? Coverage for damage to your auto. A. Bodily injury to passengers. B. Property damage to other vehicles. C. Theft or damage to the insured's own vehicle. D. Liability for damages caused by the insured to other drivers. Correct answer. C. Theft for damage to the insured's own vehicle. Explanation. Part D of a personal auto policy provides coverage for damage or loss to the insured's own vehicle, including theft or collision damage. This coverage does not extend to options A. Bodily injury, B. Other vehicles, or D. Liability, as they fall under different parts of the policy. Question 41. Which of the following perils is typically excluded from a standard homeowner's insurance policy? A. Fire. B. Lightning. C. Earthquake. D. Windstorm. Correct answer. C. Earthquake. Explanation. Standard homeowners policies generally exclude coverage for earthquakes, which require a separate endorsement or a specialized earthquake policy. Fire, lightning, and windstorm are covered perils in standard homeowners insurance policies. Question 42. In New Hampshire, which type of coverage is required for auto policies to provide protection if an at-fault driver has insufficient liability insurance? A. Uninsured motorist coverage. B. Collision coverage. C. Underinsured motorist coverage. D. Personal injury protection. Correct answer. C. Underinsured motorist coverage. Explanation. Underinsured motorist (UM) coverage is required in New Hampshire to provide compensation if the at-fault driver's liability limits are insufficient to cover the insured's losses. Options equals insured. B. Collision. And D. Personal injury protection, or separate coverages with different purposes. Question 43. Which of the following describes the purpose of the additional living expenses coverage in a homeowner's policy? A. Covers the cost of rebuilding after fire. B. Pays for temporary living costs if the home becomes uninhabitable. C. Covers damages to additional structures on the property. D. Provides additional liability protection for the homeowner. Correct answer. B. Pays for temporary living costs if the home becomes uninhabitable. Explanation. Additional living expenses. L. Coverage helps pay for extra costs if the insured must temporarily relocate due to a covered loss making the home uninhabitable. Options A, C, and D refer to other types of coverage within a homeowner's policy. Question 44. What is the primary purpose of New Hampshire's financial responsibility law? A. To enforce no-fault insurance for all drivers. B. To ensure drivers are financially responsible for damages they cause. C. To mandate health insurance for all drivers. D. To set minimum insurance rates for insurers. Correct answer. B. To ensure drivers are financially responsible for damages they cause. Explanation. New Hampshire's financial responsibility law ensures that drivers can cover damages for which they are liable. Unlike most states, New Hampshire does not mandate auto insurance, but drivers must prove financial responsibility following certain incidents. Options A, C, and D are unrelated to New Hampshire's financial responsibility requirements. Question 45. Which of the following would generally be excluded from coverage in a standard personal auto policy? A. Theft of the insured's car. B. Damage caused by the insured's negligence. C. Intentional damage caused by the insured. D. Fire damage to the insured's car. Correct answer. C. Intentional damage caused by the insured. Explanation. Intentional acts causing damage are excluded in most insurance policies, including personal auto policies, as insurance is intended to cover accidental losses. Theft, negligence-based damages, and fire damage are covered if they result from unintentional events. Question 46. In a commercial property insurance policy, the coinsurance clause typically requires the insured to carry insurance equal to what percentage of the property's value? A. 50%. B. 60%. C. 80%. D. 100%. Correct answer. C. 80%. Explanation. The standard coinsurance requirement is usually 80% of the property's value. This means the insured must carry coverage equal to 80% of the property's value to avoid penalties for partial losses. Options A, B, and D do not reflect typical coinsurance requirements. Question 47. Which coverage part of a personal auto policy covers the insured's medical bills, regardless of fault after an accident? A. Liability coverage. B. Medical payments coverage. C. Collision coverage. D. Uninsured motorist coverage. Correct answer. B. Medical payments coverage. Explanation. Medical payments coverage provides reimbursement for medical expenses for the insured and passengers regardless of fault. This coverage is separate from a liability, C. Collision, and D. Uninsured motorist, which address other types of protection. Question 48. In New Hampshire, if an at-fault driver does not have liability insurance, what type of coverage would protect the insured from financial loss due to bodily injury? A. Uninsured motorist coverage. B. Collision coverage. C. Comprehensive coverage. D. Liability coverage. Correct answer. A. Uninsured motorist coverage. Explanation. Uninsured motorist coverage provides financial protection if the insured is injured by an at-fault driver who does not have liability insurance. Options B. Collision, C. Comprehensive, and D. Liability do not address injuries caused by uninsured drivers. Question 49. Which of the following is true regarding umbrella liability insurance? A. It only covers property damage. B. It provides excess liability coverage beyond the primary policy limits. C. It is only available for auto insurance policies. D. It covers all types of losses regardless of exclusions. Correct answer. B. It provides excess liability coverage beyond the primary policy limits. Explanation. Umbrella liability insurance offers additional liability protection above primary policy limits for home, auto, and sometimes other policies. It covers both bodily injury and property damage, but does not cover all types of losses as it has its own exclusions. Question 50. In a commercial general liability CGL policy, which type of damage is covered under coverage B? Personal and advertising injury, A. Damage to the insured's business property. B. Injuries due to slander or libel. C. Medical expenses for injured employees. D. Damage due to a vehicle accident. Correct answer. B. Injuries due to slander or libel. Explanation. Coverage B in a CGL policy protects against personal and advertising injuries, which includes claims of slander, libel, wrongful eviction, and certain advertising offenses. Options A, C, and D fall outside the scope of coverage B in a CGL policy. Question 51. What is the primary purpose of the declarations page in an insurance policy? A. To list coverage exclusions. B. To provide a summary of the policy's key details, including coverages and premiums. C. To explain the terms and conditions of the policy. D. To specify the claim process. Correct answer. B. To provide a summary of the policy's key details, including coverages and premiums. Explanation. The declarations page summarizes key policy information such as the named insured, policy period, coverages, limits, premiums, and deductibles. It does not typically include exclusions, detailed terms, or claims processes, which are covered in other sections. Question 52. Under a homeowner's policy, which of the following items would typically be subject to a special limit of liability? A. Clothing. B. Cash. C. Kitchen appliances. D. Living room furniture. Correct answer. B. Cash. Explanation. Many homeowners' policies impose special limits on valuable items like cash, jewelry, and collectibles due to the high risk associated with them. Clothing, kitchen appliances, and furniture generally don't have such specific limitations. Question 53. Which type of coverage would protect a business owner if a customer is injured on their property and files a lawsuit? A. Workers' compensation coverage. B. Business interruption coverage. C. Commercial general liability coverage. D. Property damage coverage. Correct answer. C. Commercial general liability coverage. Explanation. Commercial general liability CGL insurance covers bodily injury and property damage claims filed against a business, including incidents where a customer is injured on the property. Workers' compensation, business interruption, and property damage cover other specific risks. Question 54. What is the primary function of liability insurance in a personal auto policy? A. To cover repair costs for the insured's vehicle. B. To pay medical expenses for the insured. C. To cover damage or injuries caused to others by the insured. D. To replace a stolen vehicle. Correct answer. C. To cover damage or injuries caused to others by the insured. Explanation. Liability insurance pays for damages or injuries the insured is legally responsible for causing to others. It does not cover the insured's own medical expenses, vehicle repairs, or theft of their vehicle. Question 55. In an insurance contract, which term refers to the policyholder's agreement to pay part of a claim up to a certain amount? A. Premium. B. Deductible. C. Coinsurance. D. Limit of liability. Correct answer. B. Deductible. Explanation. A deductible is the amount the policyholder must pay out of pocket on a claim before insurance benefits apply. Premiums are regular payments. Coinsurance involves shared costs and limits of liability to find the maximum the insurer will pay. Question 56. Which of the following coverages in a personal auto policy would respond if a rock breaks the insured's windshield? A. Collision coverage. B. Liability coverage. C. Medical payments coverage. D. Comprehensive coverage. Correct answer. D. Comprehensive coverage. Explanation. Comprehensive coverage handles damage to the insured's vehicle caused by events other than a collision, such as theft, weather, or a rock hitting the windshield. Collision liability and medical payments do not cover this type of damage. Question 57. A business owner's policy, BOP, generally includes coverage for which of the following? A. Only liability claims. B. Liability and property damage. C. Health insurance for employees. D. Life insurance for the owner. Correct answer. B. Liability and property damage. Explanation. A BOP combines property and liability coverage, protecting against both property loss like building or contents damage and liability claims. It does not include health or life insurance, which require separate policies. Question 58. What is the primary purpose of reinsurance? A. To provide direct insurance coverage to customers. B. To enable insurers to share and mitigate large risk exposures. C. To replace policies that have been canceled. D. To provide excess coverage for policyholders. Correct answer. B. To enable insurers to share and mitigate large risk exposures. Explanation. Reinsurance allows insurance companies to transfer portions of their risk to other insurers, helping them manage large claims and stabilize financial results. It does not provide direct customer coverage or policy replacement. Question 59. In a personal umbrella policy, what is typically required of the underlying insurance policies? They must be completely independent of the umbrella policy. B. They must have specified minimum liability limits. C. They must exclude coverage for personal injuries. D. They must be used only for high-value homes. Correct answer. B. They must have specified minimum liability limits. Explanation. Umbrella policies typically require underlying policies like auto and homeowners to maintain minimum liability limits before the umbrella coverage will apply, ensuring sufficient base coverage. Question 60. Which homeowner's policy endorsement would cover the replacement of old roofing with new materials without depreciation? A. Ordinance or law endorsement. B. Personal property replacement cost endorsement. C. Inflation guard endorsement. D. Replacement cost endorsement. Correct answer. D. Replacement cost endorsement. Explanation. A replacement cost endorsement ensures that damaged or destroyed property, including roofing, is replaced with new materials without depreciation. Other endorsements cover specific adjustments such as inflation or compliance with building codes. Question 61. What is the primary purpose of coinsurance in a commercial property insurance policy? A. To reduce the premium cost for the policyholder. B. To ensure that policyholders insure their property to a certain percentage of its value. C. To guarantee full replacement cost for the insured property. D. To cover liability claims in case of accidents. Correct answer. B. To ensure that policyholders insure their property to a certain percentage of its value. Explanation. Coinsurance clauses require policyholders to insure a specified percentage, usually 80%, 90%, or 100% of the property's value to qualify for full claim payments. If they insure below this percentage, a penalty is applied to partial losses. Question 62. Which type of policy would be best suited to protect against damage caused by natural disasters such as earthquakes? A. Standard homeowners policy. B. Personal umbrella policy. C. Earthquake endorsement or separate earthquake insurance. D. Basic peril policy. Correct answer. C. Earthquake endorsement or separate earthquake insurance. Explanation. Standard homeowners policies typically exclude earthquake damage. An earthquake endorsement or a separate earthquake policy provides coverage for such natural disasters. Question 63. What does the term open peril mean in an insurance policy? A. Coverage for only specific named perils. B. Coverage for all types of risks except those explicitly excluded. C. Coverage only for theft and vandalism. D. Limited coverage based on policyholder risk level. Correct answer. B. Coverage for all types of risks except those explicitly excluded. Explanation. An open peril policy covers all risks except those explicitly excluded in the policy. This differs from named peril policies, which only cover perils specifically listed. Question 64. Which type of insurance would cover a business if it lost income due to a fire temporarily shutting down operations? A. Commercial property insurance. B. Business interruption insurance. C. Commercial general liability insurance. D. Workers' compensation insurance. Correct answer. B. Business interruption insurance. Explanation. Business interruption insurance covers lost income and additional expenses when a business is temporarily unable to operate due to a covered peril, such as fire. This coverage is usually part of a business owner's policy or an endorsement. Question 65. In a personal auto policy, which coverage would pay for medical expenses regardless of who is at fault in an accident? A. Liability coverage. B. Medical payments coverage. C. Uninsured motorist coverage. D. Collision coverage. Correct answer. B. Medical payments coverage. Explanation. Medical payments coverage, also known as MedPay, covers medical expenses for the insured and passengers, regardless of fault. It does not include liability, uninsured motorist, or collision coverages, which serve different purposes. Question 66. What is the purpose of an additional insured endorsement in a liability policy? A. To increase the policy limits. B. To add another party to the policy with liability protection. C. To cover only property damage. D. To reduce the deductible. Correct answer. B. To add another party to the policy with liability protection. Explanation. An additional insured endorsement provides liability protection to another party such as a contractor or a landlord for claims related to the insured's activities. It does not change policy limits, deductibles, or cover only property damage. Question 67. Which of the following is generally not covered under a standard homeowner's policy? A. Fire damage. B. Theft. C. Flood damage. D. Personal property. Correct answer. C. Flood damage. Explanation. Standard homeowners policies typically exclude flood damage, which requires a separate flood insurance policy. Fire, theft, and personal property coverage are commonly included in standard policies. Question 68. What doesn't an aggregate limit equal liability policy refer to? A. The total amount the insurer will pay for all claims during the policy period. B. The maximum amount for a single claim. C. The deductible amount applied to all claims. D. The minimum payment required from the insured for each claim. Correct answer. A. The total amount the insurer will pay for all claims during the policy period. Explanation. The aggregate limit is the maximum amount an insurer will pay for all claims combined during the policy period. Separate limits, such as per occurrence limits, may apply to individual claims. Question 69. What is covered by an equipment breakdown policy? A. Loss or damage to property due to theft. B. Repair or replacement of damaged mechanical or electrical equipment. C. Injuries to employees caused by machinery. D. Liability claims arising from faulty equipment. Correct answer. B. Repair or replacement of damaged mechanical or electrical equipment. Explanation. Equipment breakdown insurance covers repair or replacement costs for machinery or electrical equipment that fails due to mechanical breakdown, electrical short, or pressure systems failure. It does not cover theft injuries or liability claims. Question 70. Which of the following best describes a replacement cost coverage in a homeowner's policy? A. The policy pays out the market value of the home at the time of the loss. B. The policy reimburses the homeowner based on the home's depreciated value. C. The policy covers the cost to repair or replace the home without depreciation. D. The policy reimburses a portion of the repair costs. Correct answer. C. The policy covers the cost to repair or replace the home without depreciation. Explanation. Replacement cost coverage allows the homeowner to repair or rebuild the home with materials of similar kind and quality without deducting depreciation, ensuring sufficient funds to restore the property to its previous condition. Question 71. In a commercial property policy, what does the period of restoration refer to in business interruption coverage? A. The time it takes to repair the physical damages. B. The time period after a loss during which business income loss is covered. C. The waiting period before any benefits are paid. D. The total duration of the policy coverage. Correct answer. B. The time period after a loss during which business income loss is covered. Explanation. The period of restoration is the duration during which business interruption coverage applies, beginning after a specified waiting period and continuing until the business can resume normal operations. Question 72. Which of the following endorsements would extend coverage for valuable items such as jewelry or fine art under a homeowner's policy? A. Scheduled personal property endorsement. B. Personal injury endorsement. C. Flood insurance endorsement. D. Earthquake endorsement. Correct answer. A. Scheduled personal property endorsement. Explanation. A scheduled personal property endorsement allows policyholders to add specific, valuable items to the policy, ensuring coverage beyond standard limits. Personal injury, flood, and earthquake endorsements cover different risks. Question 73. In auto insurance, what is the primary purpose of uninsured motorist coverage? A. To pay for damages caused by the insured to another driver. B. To cover injuries and damages if the at-fault driver lacks insurance. C. To cover rental car expenses after an accident. D. To cover liability for at-fault accidents. Correct answer. B. To cover injuries and damages if the at-fault driver lacks insurance. Explanation. Uninsured motorist coverage provides protection for the insured if they are in an accident with an at-fault driver who does not have insurance. It covers bodily injury and sometimes property damage. Question 74. Which of the following is typically excluded from a standard commercial general liability (CGL) policy? A. Bodily injury to customers. B. Damage to rented premises. C. Employee injuries. D. Personal and advertising injury. Correct answer. C. Employee injuries. Explanation. Employee injuries are typically covered by workers' compensation insurance rather than a CGL policy, which covers third-party bodily injury, property damage, and personnel advertising injury claims. Question 75. What is the purpose of a declarations page in an insurance policy? A. It summarizes the entire policy in simple terms. B. It specifies the insurer's and policyholder's responsibilities. C. It lists the insured, coverage limits, premium, and policy period. D. It provides detailed exclusions. Correct answer. C. It lists the insured, coverage limits, premium, and policy period. Explanation. The declarations page contains key details such as the insured's name, policy limits, premium, and policy period. It's an overview of the coverage but does not list exclusions or full terms. Question 76. If a property policy includes an inflation guard endorsement, what does it do? A. Adjusts coverage based on market changes in property value. B. Lowers premiums annually. C. Covers inflation-related damage. D. Reduces the deductible over time. Correct answer. A. Adjusts coverage based on market changes in property value. Explanation. An inflation guard endorsement automatically adjusts the coverage amount to reflect increases in property value, helping to ensure that the insured maintains adequate coverage over time. Question 77. What is the purpose of a no-fault auto insurance system? A. To eliminate the need for auto insurance. B. To allow for faster payouts by covering each driver's injuries regardless of fault. C. To reduce premiums for safe drivers. D. To increase limits on liability claims. Correct answer. B. To allow for faster payouts by covering each driver's injuries regardless of fault. Explanation. No-fault insurance pays for injuries to the insured regardless of who caused the accident, simplifying the claims process and reducing litigation. It doesn't eliminate auto insurance requirements or specifically lower premiums. Question 78. Under a typical homeowner's policy, which type of loss would be considered an indirect loss? A. Damage to the roof from a windstorm. B. Expenses incurred while staying in a hotel due to home repairs. C. Replacement cost for stolen jewelry. D. Damage to landscaping from a hailstorm. Correct answer. B. Expenses incurred while staying in a hotel due to home repairs. Explanation. Indirect losses are additional expenses incurred due to a covered direct loss such as needing temporary housing. Direct losses include physical damage such as roof or landscaping damage. Question 79. Which part of an insurance policy defines the specific perils covered and excluded? A. Conditions section. B. Definitions section. C. Exclusions section. D. Insuring agreement. Correct answer. D. Insuring agreement. Explanation. The insuring agreement details what perils or risks the policy covers, while the exclusions section specifies what is not covered. Conditions outline the policyholders' and insurers' obligations. Question 80. What is the main difference between an occurrence and a claims-made liability policy? A. Occurrence policies cover claims filed anytime, while claims-made covers only claims filed during the policy period. B. Claims-made policies are less expensive than occurrence policies. C. Occurrence policies do not require retroactive dates. D. Claims-made policies always have higher premiums. Correct answer. A. Occurrence policies cover claims filed anytime, while claims-made covers only claims filed during the policy period. Explanation. Occurrence policies cover events that happen during the policy period, regardless of when the claim is filed, while claims-made policies only cover claims made while the policy is in force and may require tail coverage for protection after the policy expires. Question 81. Under a homeowner's policy, which of the following is generally covered under coverage C? Personal property. A detached garage on the property. B. Jewelry up to a specified limit. C. The land the house is built on. D. Damage to the structure of the house. Correct answer. B. Jewelry up to a specified limit. Explanation. Coverage C. Personal property in a homeowner's policy typically covers personal belongings, including jewelry up to a certain limit. Higher value items may require a scheduled endorsement for full coverage. Question 82. Which of the following best describes the replacement cost method of property valuation? A. The actual cash value minus depreciation. B. The amount needed to repair or replace property without depreciation. C. The original purchase price of the property. D. The market value of the property. Correct answer. B. The amount needed to repair or replace property without depreciation. Explanation. Replacement cost coverage provides reimbursement based on the current cost to replace the damaged property with new, similar items without considering depreciation. Question 83. Which of the following is NOT typically covered under a standard flood insurance policy? A. Structural damage from rising waters. B. Furniture and appliances. C. Cars parked in a garage. D. Personal belongings in a basement. Correct answer. C. Cars parked in a garage. Explanation. Standard flood insurance does not cover vehicles, which are typically insured separately under an auto insurance policy with comprehensive coverage. Question 84. What is the purpose of an aggregate limit in liability insurance? A. To set a cap on the payout for a single claim. B. To determine the total amount payable by the insurer during the policy period. C. To specify the limit per injured person in a claim. D. To limit payments to only medical expenses. Correct answer. B. To determine the total amount payable by the insurer during the policy period. Explanation. The aggregate limit is the maximum amount the insurer will pay for all claims combined during the policy term. It caps the insurer's liability over the course of the policy period. Question 85. What is the primary difference between a named peril and an open peril policy? A named peril policy excludes certain perils, while an open peril policy lists specific covered perils. B. An open peril policy covers all perils unless excluded, while a named peril policy only covers listed perils. C. A named peril policy is generally more expensive than an open peril policy. D. An open peril policy includes liability coverage, while a named peril policy does not. Correct answer. B. An open peril policy covers all perils unless excluded, while a named peril policy only covers listed perils. Explanation. An open peril policy covers all risks unless specifically excluded, whereas a named peril policy provides coverage only for risks explicitly listed in the policy. Question 86. Which type of insurance policy pays out a death benefit if the insured dies during a specified term? A. Whole life insurance. B. Term life insurance. C. Universal life insurance. D. Endowment insurance. Correct answer. B. Term life insurance. Explanation. Term life insurance provides coverage for a specific period. If the insured passes away during the term, the policy pays a death benefit to the beneficiaries. Whole and universal life policies provide permanent coverage. Question 87. Which of the following is a common exclusion in a homeowner's policy? A. Fire damage. B. Theft. C. Earthquake damage. D. Windstorm damage. Correct answer. C. Earthquake damage. Explanation. Earthquake damage is typically excluded from standard homeowners policies and requires separate coverage or an endorsement. Question 88. What is the purpose of coinsurance in commercial property insurance? A. To provide full reimbursement for all property losses. B. To share the cost of property losses between the insurer and the insured. C. To increase the coverage amount automatically each year. D. To pay out double the claim value if the insured meets the requirements. Correct answer. B. To share the cost of property losses between the insurer and the insured. Explanation. Coinsurance requires the insured to carry a certain amount of insurance relative to the property's value, encouraging them to insure the property adequately. If the amount of insurance is less than the required percentage, the insured may share in the loss. Question 89. If a homeowner suffers a loss due to theft, which part of the homeowner's policy would provide coverage? A. Coverage A. Dwelling. B. Coverage B. Other structures. C. Coverage C. Personal property. D. Coverage D. Loss of use. Correct answer. C. Coverage C. Personal property. Explanation. Coverage C. Personal property provides protection for personal items that may be lost or damaged due to theft, regardless of whether the theft occurs at the residence or elsewhere. Question 90. Which of the following statements is true about subrogation in an insurance policy? A. It allows the insurer to seek recovery from a third party responsible for a loss. B. It enables the insured to file multiple claims for the same loss. C. It prevents the insurer from recovering any amounts paid out in claims. D. It automatically increases coverage limits if the property value increases. Correct answer. A. It allows the insurer to seek recovery from a third party responsible for a loss. Explanation. Subrogation is a legal right that allows the insurer to recover expenses from a third party responsible for the insured's loss after compensating the insured.